Right, welcome. Joining me this evening is Richard Day. We're just going to be discussing the London mayoral elections that are taking place in a couple of days' time on the 6th of May. Hello, Richard. How are we doing? All right?
Very well, thanks. And nice to see you again, David. Yeah.
Yeah, likewise. And thanks very much for your time. Just for those who aren't too familiar with yourself, you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your background?
Well, I've lived in London all my life. I wasn't really interested in politics at all until the referendum came along, and then I got interested in the outcome of that. It sort of opened my eyes a bit to a lot of things. To the I suppose you could call the EU was the first nation state of the globalist agenda, and yeah, the more I read up on it, the more I sort of felt inclined to get involved. So I joined UKIP, and that's how I got to know people like yourself. And I've been sort of campaigning for the last sort of 6 or 7 years, round about sort of London, southeast part of the country, Kent, Essex, places like that. And yeah, I always like to sort of keep abreast of what's going on.
Oh, nice, awesome. Yeah, you're quite a bit of a, if you don't mind me saying, you're quite a bit of an activist. I always see you out and about. Up to, I remember seeing you a lot down at Parliament Square as well.
Yeah, well, it becomes yeah, it becomes addictive. Once you sort of get your teeth in, there's that sort of adversarial and sense of camaraderie with the other people that you're who you're aligned with. And yeah, it does. When you see the damage that's being done to this country, once your eyes are open to it, it's very difficult to sit still and do nothing. And with what we're going to discuss in a minute with the London mayoral election, again, it's you can't just sit down and do nothing. So yeah, that's why I'm getting sort of active with that as well.
Yeah, I thought exactly the same. It's hard to sit on your hands, isn't it? Right, well, let's get started. So we've got the mayoral elections taking place on the 6th of May, as we know. Got a dreaded Sadiq Khan. Looks like he's gonna get back in, no doubt. But what he's done so far to London, he's completely destroyed London. I've said a few times, he's the worst thing to happen to London since the Blitz of the Second World War. We've got these low traffic neighbourhood schemes. I mean, you must have seen these yourself. What have you made of them?
Well, I've got them where I live, and you hear so many politicians talking about we need to bring people together, we need to eradicate the divisions in people. But then what you see is traffic NIMBYism being imposed in these areas that are divided up into the haves and the have-nots, and the better connected and the more skilled people who are able to perhaps write better letters to their local MP or have a better relationship with their local MP or live in more expensive houses seem to be the ones that, if you'd like to call it, benefit from having their streets blocked off, whereas the traffic, of course, gets rerouted round to the other people in perhaps the less desirable parts of town. And they have to breathe in the not just the toxicity of the traffic, but the toxicity of the political minds behind rerouting that traffic underneath their windows, underneath their front doors, for them and their kids to breathe it in. And it's all sold in a way that this is a benevolent thing that they're doing for everybody. Well, they're not doing it for everybody. It doesn't solve any of London's problems. You've got a picture of that fire engine up there. Another example is the crime wave that we've got. We've got a stab fest going on in London, and there's no sign of that abating. And I just wonder how on earth they think policemen are going to be able to catch these knife criminals in a police car when all they've got to do is run down a road that is semi-blocked off but accessible to pedestrians. And we've heard it from emergency services themselves. They don't agree with it. Ambulance, fire engines, and of course police. But it's this virtual signalling time that we're living in now, where everything's sort of cozy and fluffy, and people need a safe space. And if you object to it, there's something wrong with you. You're some sort of fascist-minded criminal. And yeah, it just does. It's not realistic. It doesn't relate to the lives of most people. But this isn't being run for the benefit of most people. This is being run for an elitist middle class mindset. And I guess they're going to vote. People will vote in favour of it.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, they're not very practical, are they? I mean, the two pictures that we just gone through just now, there was one there of an ambulance stuck, at the end of a road. There, a fire engine stuck, can't get through. And also, I've read stories online on online newspapers of like disabled people that used to get picked up in taxis, from right outside the front of their front door. They've got like a wheelchair ramp going out, and then the black taxi will pull along and they'll just simply get into the black taxi as they've got wheelchair ramps. And they're no longer able to do that. They're now got to struggle up the road to get to the taxi or whatnot. So it's a big inconvenience for anyone really, other than these woke cyclists. And
and of course it increases the cost of the fare if you need to get a taxi, because let's just say you was to get a black taxi. One of these, sorry.
You got the old meter ticking, didn't you?
Yeah, you have, yeah. And one of the reasons you would pay for a black taxi is because of their knowledge. They would know how to get you around the rat runs to make the journey quicker and more cost effective. But now they've lost that skill, if you like, because they're just basically shoved into the traffic jam with everybody else. And it's also quite sinister that they use these flower beds. Or these made up wooden green flower beds, that it's something nice, cozy and passive. And of course, stuck all over it is reminders of COVID-19, the neuro-linguistic program there. Every flat surface has to have a label on to remind everyone of that as well. So it's political, isn't it? It's from top to bottom.
It is. I just want to touch on this as well. So we've got a display of the fireworks that took place with the old Black Lives Matter fist. That's another thing as well, which Khan did. He allowed for we always speak about a two-tier policing in London, but he allowed for Black Lives Matter to vandalise the war memorials, and Winston Churchill statue on 3 separate occasions before people actually themselves took action. There was veterans that came across the country. One of the veterans who I interviewed, the actual interview itself went viral, and Sadiq Khan and James O'Brien were talking about this chap who said he should be arrested and shot for treason. Basically, long and short of it is, they just called everyone far right that was there, but obviously, it goes a lot deeper than that. These war memorials, they represent all of our glorious dead, black and white, and brown, all different persuasions, from modern war to First and Second World Wars and whatnot. What's your thoughts on the way, well, as I would describe it, a two-tier policing? What's your thoughts on the way that Sadiq Khan's dealt with Black Lives Matter, that we saw the riots and the destruction in London? What do you make of it?
Yeah, well, I think so. In sort of thinking about this and what's behind it, and although Sadiq Khan is at the pinnacle of it because he's in London, there seems to be a corporate political mindset that has infested political parties and the populace in general, the media, particularly from the media. And obviously one of their main targets is anti-patriotism. And if you look at war memorials or anything that represents our heritage, it's something that people can connect to with national identity. So you have this, appreciative public who cherish those monuments. But to their mind, I think it perpetuates a patriotic mindset.
Just lost you a little bit there, Richard.
Passed down through the generations. You might take your children and explain and take them to the Imperial War Museum, or take them around to the House of Parliament and just say, look, this is what they did at this period of time. This is what they had to do. Right. Okay. What I was saying was that we have, our symbolic representations of our past history, our wars, that they symbolise what needed to be done at the particular time in the history of this country, and the people who stood up and were responsible and succeeded against tyranny. But they want to erase that. They want to besmirch it, and they want to change the minds of people. So it's predictable that they want to sort of try and paint the people that uphold these values as having some sort of fascistic mindset. So there is a war of minds going on. There's a culture war going on, but I don't think it necessarily. Well, it does come from the left. But I think it comes from corporations as well. I think there's corporate backing for this. I mean, when you think Coca-Cola very recently came out of a statement, "Be less white." Now, Coca-Cola should just be concentrated on selling soft drinks. That's what they do. They should be celebrating their own product, rather than becoming, trying to get people to think in a certain way. And when you see groups like Extinction Rebellion, and some of the Greens, and also some of these Antifa activists, they all seem to be very well funded. Now, I don't think this money's coming from, a nice old lady with a llama farm out in the country who's worried about, the environment from that respect. I think this is a corporate takeover for the heart and soul of this country, because they want to control it. They want to control what we think, what we do, and what we consume. And I think the more sort of malleable their client base is, I mean, when you think, instead of worrying about the products that they're producing, they're actually trying to change their customer base. And Ben and Jerry's ice cream, among others, there are lots of companies now that just seem to have this vested interest in basically changing the minds of their consumers in a politicized fashion. We've never seen it before, and the media are employed in on it as well. So actually, we might have to.
Well, I agree with you on that. I think, and what you just touched on there, we saw with Black Lives Matter, didn't we? We saw the different corporations that they donated millions, hundreds and hundreds of millions to Black Lives Matter, only for the leaders to buy loads of houses and whatever. Which brings me to this. So Sadiq Khan started up the Diversity Commission within the public realm to oversee the removal of statues and monuments, and even renaming street names. And this guy here was he confronted the Queen back in 2007. He stood up, started shouting his mouth off. So he's disrespected the Queen of our country. And Sadiq Khan appoints him as one of the 15 members of this commission. Anyway, it turns out he'd made racial remarks towards Jewish people a while back, so he was made to resign. So yeah, I mean, it goes quite deep, doesn't it? It's quite sinister to put somebody like that on your panel in the first place. What do you think?
Well, that's the classic technique. What he's basically done is let the rabid dog out of the box, and then once the rabid dog has done its damage, Sadiq will then reel him back in and look like he's the peacemaker, and looks like he sort of disagrees and has basically disciplined that dog again, and we don't need that on our streets. But the fact is, Sadiq Khan, if you look back at his history, he uses vile racist terms like Uncle Toms and coconuts to describe people. So it's ugly. There is an ugly underbelly to Sadiq Khan's associates, and of course himself. Unfortunately, they have been foisted on us. And what he also does very cleverly is tries to embrace some of these cuddly green policies to placate the really naive and gullible people that live in London. and sort of he gets those on board as well to sort of to push through the more sinister aspects of his ambition, in my opinion, because I think Sadiq Khan's ambitions for London are quite sinister. I think every now and again we see the ugly truth revealed. Example that you just put up, so yeah, and it's depressing. It's depressing to think that we've had him for 4 years, and there's every likelihood that he's going to have 4 more years to do even more damage.
Well, he made a comment not so long ago, it was probably about a month ago now. He put a tweet out saying that there was too many white men in engineering and whatnot. And I just thought to myself, could you imagine if another politician said something similar and said that there's too many Asian men, in corner shops and taxi drivers and whatever? It wouldn't go down very well, would it? But he's crashed TfL.
No, but Hamza Youssef up in Scotland.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Hamza Youssef said exactly the same thing. Funnily enough, moaning about white men, of course, living in the UK and moaning about white men. Basically, it shows their impatience. This country isn't changing quickly enough for them racially, and in positions of influence. They want to see more people like them and less people like us. That's the top and bottom of it. But what are they hoping to achieve? What are they hoping to achieve? What is it they feel that their people can do, or their choice of people could do that white people couldn't do? Because you're just judging people by the colour of their skin. To walk in and say there are too many white people in this room is deeply sinister. And as you just said, what if somebody else said it about people of another race or another colour? He'd be jumping up and down. The police would be knocking on your door.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's another aspect of it as well. The police, look how he's been able to manipulate the police to carry on with all this nonsense. But again, I think this it goes further up the food chain than Sadiq Khan. We have seen, soft policing on left-wing projects, particularly green projects. And of course, we've got this Agenda 2030 coming up, which it seems that anybody that can help that along or raise awareness to it is given carte blanche by the police to basically rip up and smash anything they want. And if you look at, when you think about the march we had a couple of Saturdays ago in London, the anti-lockdown march, you saw everybody there had a banner that was homemade. They'd gone to the troubles to do that themselves. But whenever there's an Extinction Rebellion march or a lot of Antifa marches, all these left-wing marches, they've all got their stuff bought, manufactured and paid for by someone. And again, it's sort of like there is this sort of tacit communication between those people and the Metropolitan Police, because the Metropolitan Police are very soft on. We don't see the incidents like we saw at the end of the demonstration last week, where those kids are in the park just playing some musical instruments, having a bit of fun in a park, which is the place where you're supposed to do those sorts of things. The police turned up and with their photographers started causing mayhem so that they could project the wrong image of it in the press the next morning, which had been a very, very successful demonstration, a very peaceful one, and of course a massive one that the media completely ignored. And I don't think Sadiq Khan had anything to say about it either, did he?
No, he didn't. It's funny you mention that, because you're right there. I mean, we saw recently with Extinction Rebellion, they let's not forget, Sadiq Khan called them allies, didn't he? And I don't know if you've seen that secret footage. It was filmed by Extinction Rebellion. They were in a meeting with him, and he actually called them his allies. So they're all watermelons, aren't they? Green on the outside, red on the inside. Well, just on the last slide, we're just showing about Sadiq Khan. Basically, he's bankrupted TfL, and I just put this up on a slide because I just think this is interesting. I'm What were your thoughts on this? So Sadiq Khan, he's a vice president of the Fabian Society. So those who don't know, the Fabian Society is a far left socialist organisation that want to bring about socialism within the UK via gradualist and reformist efforts rather than through like a revolutionary overthrow. So we see people like Sadiq Khan, Gordon Brown, was also a member of the Fabian Society, and look what happened when he handed over um, the government to the Conservatives when they got kicked out. He bankrupted us and he sold all the gold reserves for a fraction of the price of what it was worth. Now we're seeing Sadiq Khan going down the same pathway. So it's like these Fabians deliberately crash, the funds, so to speak, just so they can say, "Oh, capitalism doesn't work." I just think it's a big conflict of interest to be the vice president of the Fabian Society that literally wants to dismantle capitalism. They have the exact same views as Black Lives Matter, hence why we're seeing this diversity commission. He can tear down the statues that they started doing. And he's mayor of London, in charge of London's finances. I just think someone like that, there's a huge conflict of interest. And not many people know that he's the vice president of the Fabian Society.
Yeah, well, I think Tony Blair is as well. I think a lot of those old Labour, the Labour side of the globalist movement, if you like, that's almost their club. But the continual willful financial incompetence of Khan, it's indicative of what the Labour did with the rest of the country. It's been said before. The current situation in London now is probably Labour's vision for the whole country. If the Labour Fabians had total control of this country, then probably everything would look like London, and every monument would be pulled down. It would be replaced by some fallacy, some falsehood, some completely artificial narrative, because they just don't want this country to be what it is. They don't like this country. They want to live in it. They want all the benefits from it. They want to create grievance culture amongst their own voter base, and give everybody the impression that they're all hard done by, and it's all to do with these 18th century white men that did all of these terrible things to humanity, and that somehow has got to be erased. But I do think there's a corporate interest in this as well. I don't think it is just a left and a right thing. There's too much money being put behind these politicians, and there's too much of the same groupthink that goes beyond politics. You've only got to switch a TV on and watch the adverts and watch the social engineering being perpetuated by these big corporatists, and I think it's there is this sort of collective thinking. And collective agenda. And as I said, I think it goes beyond the Fabian Society. That's one facet of it. But I think it's bigger than that now. And it's almost like them and us. It's corporate-owned politics against normal, everyday patriots. And when I say patriots, I don't mean sort of like, rabid patriots, but I just mean people that are like this country, are proud of it, and want to uphold its values and its history and have a realistic account of our country's historical past. But that just seems to upset them further, which is why they just want to go for the minds of the kids as well at the moment. It just seems they're trying to sort of rush this through the education system. Children's TV shows now, like these sort of horrible histories, that kind of thing, are almost reflective of the adverts you see in between the program. So basically, you get the narrative in the TV show, and then at the ad break, it's further consolidated with whatever products they're trying to push on. But there's also there's another agenda there as well, which you've got to be blind not to see it. They're just naked with it. There's no hiding it.
Totally agree. I mean, just the image here. So this is when Sadiq Khan was a solicitor and he was representing the Nation of Islam, the leader of the Nation of Islam. He was, trying to come into the UK. I think he was barred, but the reason I put these images up, we all know that, he's got ties to radical Islam. His brother-in-law is an Islamist, apparently doesn't speak to him anymore, but this is when he was a solicitor, and, here he is here in 2004, Islamist rally where he shared a platform with 7 other extremists. Now, I just think it's a bit rich for someone like Sadiq Khan, to set up something like the Diversity Commission to tear down statues, as you just pointed out, of 18th century white men. But then he's been a representative of Islamic extremists that have killed thousands, and well, if not hundreds of thousands of people across the globe, in quite horrific fashion as well. I just think, and this image here, this is just made me laugh because he always goes on about LGBTQ and all that stuff, and here he is standing next to an imam who's uh, anti-homosexual and has extreme views on women and whatnot. But again, and here he is with 9/11. He was one of the representatives for the 9/11 terrorists, and yet they're talking about 18th century white men. Let's talk about modern day, what's going on now. So I think, yeah, I don't know. For me, I just think.
Well,
Go on.
they seem to do a very negative scrutiny of everybody else's history, except their own.
Yeah.
They're almost offended by everything and ashamed of nothing from their own past, because their own past is immaculate, in their mind. And I think a big revelation has come out of France when we saw those 20 generals. They've written a letter to Emmanuel Macron and said if he doesn't get a grip of things, we're going to see a civil war in France. Now that has been sort of, oh, by the way, Macron, being a globalist he is, has slapped them down. But I think that might have invigorated a lot of the voters who may now realise what their future looks like, because the collateral damage that these globalists are prepared to place on Europeans to get their projects over the line can no longer be ignored. In France and very many others. So they've had the balls to come out and say that. That would obviously have been picked up by Marine Le Pen and her voters. And let's face it, I think being a centrist now is just another word for cowardice. I think you've really got to just pick. You've got to pick one side. You either go with these lunatics and pretend to yourself that there's nothing nefarious going on with the likes of Sadiq Khan, despite his fluffy green policies and the LGBT policies that he's happy to go along with. If you don't stand up and see and smell the coffee and get behind a patriotic alternative without using the name of that party, but you see what I mean, because the Lib Dems, the Greens, the Conservatives, they're all just centrist cowards. The only option that you've got is somebody who's prepared to stand up and say it as it is, and just say, look, this we're not prepared to have people being, school teachers having their heads chopped off for showing cartoons, or people being raped all the time, or people being attacked all the time. You just can't, we just can't have it. We're not prepared to turn a blind eye to it any longer. I don't care who you put in power, who the Fabians throw up, because the Fabian society it isn't just a British thing, it's all over the world.
Oh, it is, yeah.
So So they've got that agenda, and they, to be honest with you, they seem to be winning. They seem to be, people just seem to be stupefied, hypnotized, whether it's that or whether it's cowardness, whatever it is. But let's just see what happens in France, because I think that's going to be very much be the bellwether, because they've had it a lot worse there than we've had it, and we've had it bad enough here. But obviously, I think another church got burned down, didn't it, the weekend in France? Didn't the church in Lille get right?
Yeah, it seems to be a regular occurrence. I did do a video on that a while back of church fires that were here, and I was going to have a look in France, but you'll be surprised if you look. It doesn't make you know, stuff like that. You know, sometimes you'll see it on social media or whatever. But a lot of these church fires, Richard, they don't even make the news, mate. So you wouldn't even know about it unless if you actually do, you know, like a local search, and you might find it's been picked up by the local paper of that area. But there are so many churches that are being set on fire right across, not just in Europe, but in America as well. But yes, it's absolutely it's crazy. But just touching what you said there about, you know, we need someone to stand up, you know, to all this madness, because all these politicians all seem to be the same. So I just want to go through some of these candidates that are standing in the mayoral elections. So we've got Sean Bailey's, we know, Conservative candidate, and one of his policies now, he's saying that he'll stop the expansion of ULEZ. It's a bloody Tory idea in the first place. It was the Tories to come up with the idea. Um, and the rest of these candidates, I mean, we just bombed through these quickly. We've got the Greens. So again, want to invest 400 million into cyclists. If you think things are bad now, you know, you get a speeded up version of their agenda if you vote for the Greens. I mean, they want to take us back to the Stone Age, don't they? Same with Liberal Democrats. This is the second candidate, because the first one was dropped for anti-Semitism. Funny trait with the left, yeah. And then brings us to Mr. Curtin. I just want to touch on him because, you know, he's pretty much wants to scrap all of their policies, all of Khan's policies, return order, and yeah, basically get things back to normal. I mean, you've been following Dave Curtin for a while now. I've been out a couple of times with him. You've seen, you know, how he's been picked up by, you know, people on the street. He seems to, you know, he's got a good rapport with people. People seem to take to him, like to him, but like, you know, like his policies. What do you make of David Curtin?
Yeah. Well, in a time, you know, he's called out Khan for all of the things that Khan deserved to be called out for. And what's interesting to see is how little support he's had from the other GLA members with the green issues, if you like. I mean, we all know the Tories are behind it, and the Tories want to take us there. I think a lot of these renewables investors are you know, in bed with the Tories. They wouldn't be able to get these, you know, they wouldn't be into this this agenda if they wasn't. And of course, they're all going out to these meetings in Davos to try and, you know, impose this on us. Obviously, the Greens want to do it at a ridiculously fast rate. So the Tories are basically looking, you know, trying to look like we're holding it all back, guys. You know, we're just basically we're not going to do it too quickly. You know, we realise that people have got to adjust to it, and we're going to protect you from the harshest environmentalists, if that's what they are, because a lot of it's based on nonsense, as you know. Yeah, they sort of look like they're sort of policing the change so that it only happens at almost like an organic rate. Whereas the Lib Dems and the Greens and Labour are trying to move it so rapidly and unrealistically and unfairly as well, that the Tories could almost come out of it looking like they stand for some sort of common sense argument. But the only person with any common sense in that GLA, as far as I'm concerned, is Sadiq Khan. So, you know, I hope to see him back on it. I think he understands Londoners better than most, because I think he's just more realistic. He's just more grounded. He isn't owned by anybody. He hasn't got massive donors making demands, you know, on him. It's basically a grassroots party. He's only just started. I think it's only like 6 months old. So you know, I wish him the best of luck with that. But it's nice to hear his truth. You know, when he walks around local markets. He's very well received by people. He's very well received by normal, everyday people that make London what it is. You know, the market stall holders, the cabbies, Joe Public. You know, the ordinary people that just want to go about their lives and live in a normal way without these impositions that they probably can't afford anyway. I mean, look at the you know, expanding the congestion zone beyond the North and South Circular, which means a lot of people have got to get in their cars and pay, I think it's 12.5 quid every time they do that. Now, if you've got a sick relative who need you to come round at the drop of a hat. You know, I did with my dad when he was very ill. You need to get in your car, and you don't want to think about, can I afford to get in the car? You just want to get round there and help them. Now, you've got to jump through all of their barriers as well that they've got, blocking the roads up. You're also going to be charged for it. And then you've got to try and find somewhere to park, because all these councils, you know, they're all going skint because of their, you know, with their bloody woke policies that they can't afford. So they're punishing the motorists in that respect as well. And you know, a lot of people do need a car. I know some people drive the car unnecessarily, or what we might deem as unnecessarily, but you know, I don't want to live in this sort of a world where everybody's judged on every movement they make, and was that necessary by my criteria, which is what we're seeing from all of the other parties. You either live in a free country or you don't.
Now, Richard, what do you make of the likes of Lawrence Fox? I've seen, you know, a lot of these policies seem to be just mirrored off of David Curtin. Whenever David Curtin's made an announcement, a week later or so, or you know, or 24 hours later, Lawrence Fox seems to be pushing the same message.
Yeah, it's funny because when he first came out, Lawrence Fox, I was a little bit suspicious, because he'd gone from Channel 4's Gogglebox, Channel 4 being the you know, the bed of Marxism in the media, and then he had that stint on Question Time that came along. The BBC put him on. I mean, obviously at that time, I believe he was sort of tweeting in support of Jeremy Corbyn and staying in the EU, and was very much in touch with his lovey base. And then we're led to believe that he was red-pilled by this awful woman that criticised him in the audience and called him a racist and an entitled white man, etc., etc. And this all of a sudden galvanised him into seeing the truth and seeing the reality. And then he's going on, and you know, he's gonna march up the hill for all the rest of us. But then he jumps into bed with Richard Tice. Now. You know, you see Lawrence Fox making these, I mean, passion speeches. I saw him down at Islington the other day. But people forget that he's been prostituting his emotions all his working life. It's what he does for a living. He's an actor. And Richard Tice has prostituted the efforts and votes of a lot of people who joined the Brexit Party.
Yeah.
Because for all the work and money and energy that they put in, they were just, him and Farage basically just submitted it and just handed it over to the Tories, didn't they? You know, so and then Lawrence Fox teams up with them. You know, I just think we don't need. They're not going to be the solution, because I see people like Fox and Tice and their media chums, and there are a few of them, you know, that are sort of making those noises towards them. It's almost as if they want to be the new establishment. They want to be not only the new establishment media, but the new establishment itself. And I don't know who's putting the money up behind these people. I don't know what they want for their pound of flesh. I'll be very surprised if it's based purely on out patriotism and worry about what the wokeists and what their corporate backers are going to do to this country. There might be a bit of that, but I also wonder what they really want, because they don't seem to want to associate themselves with genuinely patriotic people. They're more in the sort of centrist camp than they would be in our side of politics, if you like, you know. And I think that's a dead place to be politically at the moment. I think if you're going to sit dead in the centre, you've really got nowhere to go, because you haven't got the guts to turn around and actually, you know, tell people where to get off. And I think some people need to do that, you know. And I think it's going to happen in France, and I think it needs to happen here too. But I think people will keep an eye on France, and maybe people will become a bit braver after, you know, if the people behind Marine Le Pen get a good result, or they'll become more cowardly if she doesn't. But they're in politics. Not for the reasons I'd like to see them in politics. I don't think. I don't think they're genuine. I think that's I don't think Fox and Tice are genuine people. I think there's something saccharine about them. And I mean, I don't know what Lawrence Fox will do after after May the 6th. I don't know what Richard Tice is going to do. But there's so many people trying to eke their way into that centre position. It's getting so overcrowded that they really offer. You know, we've done those Zoom meetings, and we've had various people from different political parties, and they all moan about each other, but they're all offering the same thing, which is nothing.
Yeah.
No change.
Yeah. And what do you make of Brian Rose? Have you seen Brian Rose's campaign? So I think, though, for me, you get two choices. I'll be voting Dave Curtin, and my second choice will be going to Brian Rose. I think he's run a fantastic campaign. The only downside to him is he wants to turn London City into like a Cardiff, where you can't drive, it's pedestrian only, which for me I dislike. But out of everybody, I'd rather give him my second vote. What have you made of him?
Again, I don't entirely know what he's. I don't book him as a Londoner. I think he's American. That's not to say that he's I mean, God, I'd rather Brian Rose than Sadiq Khan. But I'm not entirely convinced by him either. I'm not. There's something about him that I just find he's a little bit too brash. I don't like the pinstripe suit, big red tie, in your face type image. I think there are. I think, to be honest with you, I think the two most genuine candidates in it are Piers Corbyn and David Curtin. Although I'm not on Piers Corbyn's side of politics, but I think he's true to what he believes in. I like his honesty. I like the fact that he will criticise people on his own side of politics, if you like, and call them out. And I'm not, for me, I think, being bold and coming out and talking about climate change and man-made global warming, and how much of that is hocus pocus and how much of it is genuine science, and what the motivations behind the people that are trying to shove that on us are. I don't know what Brian Rose's policies are on that, but I get the feeling that he would perhaps buy into that himself.
Yeah, I agree with you. He's made a few comments by saying like trust the science and this, that, the other. So yeah, I mean, you're probably right on that one.
Science? I mean, I like the fact that he's anti-lockdown. I mean, that's to me that would probably be the only sort of redeeming factor for him. But no, for me, I think David Kern ticks so many boxes. I'm almost unlikely to vote for another candidate, but if I was, I think I'd probably vote for Piers Corbyn, just because I think he's genuine.
Yeah, I'll be voting Dave Curtin. Like I said, I think you get a second vote, didn't you, in the mayoral elections, if I remember rightly. You get option A, option B, and I think if you do, but yeah, I think Dave Curtin all the way. I think if you want to see an end to all this madness, you want to open up the roads, and you want to be able to drive to work. You think of all the single mums that do the school runs in the morning, will go shopping and stuff like that. This is really going to affect them. All these roads being shut down, and in the ULEZ, they're going to have to pay £12 a day, and it's 24 hours as well. It's not like it's just a congestion charge. It runs 24 hours, and it's 365 days a year. And on top of that, you got your businesses, vans as well. So if you've got a vehicle that's over 3.5 ton, you have to pay, I think it's 120 quid a day, which is ludicrous. Predictions.
Predictions.
What do you reckon?
I hate to say it, I think Khan's going to get in again. I think it's going to be a lot closer this time. Because I think the votes have been split so much. There's 20. I mean, our country's turning into a bloody madhouse. And when you look at the 20 candidates for the mayoral election, and you see how many genuine politicians there are in it, compared to people just shouting their mouth off, throwing a few quid at their ego, and trying to make a name for itself. It doesn't do. It just doesn't help matters. And to just take a look at some of these characters that will try and delude themselves that they're going to be, that they'd like to be mayor of London. No, I think when it all boils down to, I think Sadiq Khan will probably win. Just for the, it's that saying, oh God, I've lost my train of thought. But what's that? What's that saying? You know, demography is destiny. I think he's just got. I think he's got just too many disgruntled people that have been engineered. They've bought the grievance culture pill, and they'll vote for them. Vote for him, Carnes, thinking that they're going to get something. You know, but the well's running dry. The money's running out. You know, so I just don't see how he can afford to keep his. How he can afford his own bullshit. Basically, that's what it is. His own bullshit's getting too expensive.
Yeah, it's our expensive taxpayer, unfortunately, isn't it? You know, council tax is going up in London as well. He's rising that to try and fill in this black hole he's made with TfL. Well, Richard, thanks very much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on and discussing, you know what's going on.
I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed talking to you. Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be back on again.
Great. No, I'd love to. Let's see what happens on May the 6th. Might be something else to talk about then. We might have a nice surprise. Perhaps David get back on GLA.
Both Dave Curtin. Right, thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button, and I'll speak to you again soon. Thanks a lot, Richard.
Good to see you. Thank you.